For men who used to be creepy towards women and have since stopped, what was it that made you realize you were creepy that prompted you to change? I had what I can only call a grand moment of realization. There was a girl who I was acquainted with, and she was obviously, obsessively, and weirdly into me. Being at the state of peak neckbeard that I was desperate for a girlfriend. But for whatever reason I was not into the idea. I knew her too well, and although she was interested in me, I was not interested in her. I spent a long time thinking about whether I should start seeing this girl I wasn't attracted to. Then it clicked for me, sometimes people just aren't into you. That's okay, and it's actually a good thing not to have to say yes to a relationship just because someone thinks they're qualified to date you. That moment back in 2009 changed my perspective so much, and I was able to realize that other people have and deserve their own autonomy. Ooh. Man, it took me recognizing I was addicted to alcohol, tobacco, pornography, and sex. I had been aggressive toward women and objectifying them since I was a child. I think this happened because I was exposed to sex at such a young age. I thought all relationships were supposed to be how movies and shows were, so I just emulated what I saw. Once I got sober I realized how much of a monster I was and took the necessary steps to really implement change in my life. Lots of therapy. Lots of crying. Self-reflection as to why I was emulating that specific behavior, and quitting my addictions. It's been a journey, but I'm happy to say I've been in a loving committed relationship with proper boundaries for a year now. I know a guy who is creepy towards women. I shared a flat with him and another guy. The other guy used to bring his girlfriend over sometimes and we became friendly. One night she confessed to me the other guy creeps her out and she's a little scared of him. I had no idea he had that effect. I was surprised. But the other day I was at the park with him. A young blonde girl, looked in her 20s, wearing black shorts and a t-shirt, came and started walking her dog in the park while we were talking. She's a nice-looking girl. My friend turned like a lighthouse to face her, and just stared. And stared. In fact, wherever she moved, he turned to face her. After about 60 seconds of this, I was still talking to him. I got annoyed. Dude, will you stop staring at her? You're going to make her feel uncomfortable. What? You've been staring at her non-stop since she got to the park. You had a look, now look away and stop bothering her. I think you're being paranoid. She left then. And a few days later I caught him doing it again with another girl. Now, I like pretty girls myself, but you don't stare at them. And you don't stand up, stare in their direction, then turn to face them everywhere they go, like a radar or something. I tried to tell him he's being creepy, but he won. Listen. Creepy guys don't always realize they are creepy. And don't listen either. I didn't have any sisters, and no female friends growing up. Girls were always this magic unknown entity, who were capable of sex. So I was always awkward around them, because I didn't know what to do or say. I didn't want to accidentally offend anyone or say something stupid. So I pretty much said nothing. In my last year of high school, I spent more time around girls and realized that they really aren't that different than my male friends. They make the same dick jokes and stuff. They have the same goals in life. So slowly, I learned to relax a bit and treat women like normal human beings, just like everyone else. I'm guilty of this, though naively and innocently so. This sounds weird to me now, but I actually grew up in a household that valued back, neck, and shoulder rubs. I did this for a long time to people I was friends with, men and women. In my head, it was just a way of saying I cared. In retrospect, it undoubtedly gave a super creepy vibe. I stopped once I saw it in context of someone else doing it to a woman, and her facial reaction to it. Then it just clicked. Oh, wow, that's inappropriate. I used to have this older man always flirt and be unprofessional towards me at work when I first started. I was around 24 years old. After I had enough of his weird comments and flirting, I told him that he has a daughter the same age as me, which was true because he'd talk about his family at times, and that how would he like it if some older man was talking to his daughter like that and making sexual comments to her. He became less weird and flirtatious and more regular, holding normal conversations. He moved shifts so I don't even see him anymore. When I was in my late teens and early 20s I was constantly chasing girls, as the expression goes. Nobody ever seemed to take offense to it, that kind of behavior seemed expected. Plus, I always seemed to be able to find someone who was interested in hooking up. Then I got married, so obviously I stopped. I found myself single again 10 years later and quickly reverted to my old ways. It wasn't long before I realized that things that I could get away with at 21 no longer worked at 32. In fact, Based on the reactions of a couple of women, I realized I was being creepy. Of course the women I was perusing were also older too. I realized I had to take a more mature approach. Things went much better after that, but I still cringe to think of some of my early attempts to get back in the game. My best friend was actually the creepy guy. We were both freshmen in college and virgins, and I was an attractive woman who spoke to him. It took me leaving a party because he wouldn't stop putting his hands on my shoulders, and a guy friend of mine walking up to him a few days later, not at my bidding, he just decided to do it on my own, and telling him, "You make me now really uncomfortable, stay away from her." He apologized to me and gave me space, but we were still in the same social circles, so we saw each other around and gradually became really good friends. He has apologized for making me uncomfortable multiple times, and once over a year after that party, he turned to me and just said, "I'm so sorry for that night." When I broke up with my first serious girlfriend, I was totally heartbroken. I called her all the time, cried on the phone. I even threatened to kill myself and told her so. This went on for some time. Eventually I threatened again to kill myself and went to bed drunk. I woke up to a voicemail from her crying her eyes out begging me not to do it. I was so ashamed about my behavior. I realized in that message what I had become. It was absolutely her right, as it was mine, to end a relationship at any time for any reason, without being hounded and traumatized by the ex. I was evil and toxic. I apologized and promised never to do it again. After that I left her alone. I was still heartbroken, but I found comfort in my friends, and in activities and hobbies instead. I had several failed relationships after her, but I never again treated a woman this way. This was over 15 years ago and now I am married. I have been tempted many times to contact her and apologize some more for my behavior, but the truth is, she is better off without me in her life. I hope she is well. Addition, a lot of people replied to this and I tried to answer every single comment, but there was just too many. I never expected this to blow up like it did. Every single message I received was honest and lovely. I appreciate them all. To love, and to happiness forever. I'm a woman, but I have a story about being creepy towards men. In college, me and my long-term boyfriend had just broken up because he wanted to date my friend instead. This left me desperate to date or sleep with new people so I would feel desirable again. My good friend Paul was in college as well and had a cute roommate who was not into me. I asked for his number and Paul straight up told me no because his roomie wasn't into me. Well, I went through Paul's phone for the guy's number anyway. It only took me a couple days to realize how genuinely creepy and desperate I was being, and every time I look back at this I cringe. When I was younger, I would sometimes realize someone was trying to get me fucked up or otherwise defenses down, so they could fuck me. I was always really devastated and felt dirty, like I was being preyed on. But I kind of did the same thing to other people, which was justifiable because I was crushing on them or whatever. It took me a while to realize, the behavior you don't like is what you're doing to others. After that I became a lot more transparent and stopped doing the whole creepy friend with ulterior motives and just started doing the "I am interested in you and would enjoy a date" from the get-go, and it made things a lot better for everyone. If there was rejection I dealt with it and moved on, like a healthy person. Maturity finally caught up with me. I had one particularly bad experience with a girl who I think was genuinely interested in me at one point, but I was super awkward and didn't have a clue how to act right. So I never really made a move beyond sad attempts at flirting, and so I think she eventually just thought I was a weirdo who wouldn't leave her alone. Then one day we were both in a big group of people just talking and a mutual friend completely out of the blue suggested that I should ask me out, and what followed was possibly the single most uncomfortable moment of my entire life to date. I pretty much turned white and she was out of there. I'm sure she believed that I had put our mutual friend up to it. I had not. If anything, I was just as horrified. That single event shattered my self-confidence so completely that I spent the next year and a half actively avoiding any kind of conversation or interaction with girls, because I had concluded that I must be a creep and therefore the right thing to do was to protect girls from my creepiness by isolating myself. Eventually I kind of figured myself out, and by my early 20s I was still awkward as hell, but I managed to have a couple of relationships and plenty of platonic female friendships. My brother used to catcall women all the time until once when I was with him. He was driving, I was the passenger, and he yelled out to a woman in another car about how hot she looked. I turned to him and said very casually yet matter-of-factly, "You know, women hate it when men talk to us like that. It's not flattering, it's objectifying and disrespectful." He got quiet, his eyes glazed over, and I saw him taking in what I just said. It had simply never occurred to him that what he was doing could be seen as anything other than flattering. He never, ever did it again, and I saw him grow into an extremely respectful person over the next couple of years. Sometimes all it takes is someone to make them aware. This is why women call on men to call out their guy friends for this type of behavior. Some men look at women as objects, and they don't take us seriously. But, the same thing coming from your sister or one of their guy friends? Completely different reaction. I'd if I was ever creepy. I'm sure I was, but I was told I was too intense. Too forward. Which made girls uncomfortable. I figured that everyone was having sex, so why not just start the conversation there and see where it goes? Yeah, no one wants to talk to relative strangers about your dick going inside their bodies. When someone you think about constantly looks at you with disgust. It's pretty painful. When I went to college, I realized how many girls were actually sexually assaulted. It seemed like all of them. Seriously, every single girl had a story about being accosted, or groped, or held down, or raped. When I was saying sexual things, I think they thought I was the kind of guy to do that. The disgust turned to fear in the post-Me Too era. Honestly, I think it's for the better. Talking about sex with a female stranger can be a can of worms of shit that I had no idea was even happening. Coming from a place of privilege to try and get some sex is cringy AF. Sex isn't the answer to your problems. And women aren't objects to help make you happy. Basically, just have a modicum of respect for the human being in front of you. I was what I would describe as an incel in training. I basically ticked all the boxes, except I had no idea that something like this was even a thing, and I was still kinda reserved about it. I'm glad I changed before I found those echo chamber forums. I don't even want to think what I would have become if I had all my views being reinforced. I'm really into psychedelics, although I tend to stick with weed now. LSD was a big part of my later high school years. One day I dropped acid with the boys like I usually did. We got to talking about relationships, and that's when the bad trip started. Once I realized that the trip was gonna be bad, I excused myself to a storage room in my house that we basically just put a bunch of shit in. Unluckily for me, what I didn't realize was that in this room was also a large mirror, so big that I could see myself entirely. Now, if you know anything about LSD, you know what happens when you look in a mirror, especially during a bad trip. I basically went on a spirit journey where I could see what I was becoming, and it scared the absolute shit out of me. That's it. I did LSD, took a good look at myself, and was so extremely terrified of what I saw that I basically had no choice but to change.